loud. All righty. Perfect. So we're recording now. Thanks so much for coming back. We're going to be talking about do's and don'ts of sequencing this afternoon. So as we mentioned this morning, you know, and even before lunch, transitioning, it's not safe to transition from external to neutral or neutral to external on a weight-bearing balancing pose. So here's an example, going from a half moon to revolved half moon to standing splits, no bueno. You can go from revolved half moon to standing splits all day long because it's the same orientation of the femur. And
the other one?
But we do not want to go from external rotation to internal rotation. I'm sorry, from external rotation to neutral rather, on a standing weight-bearing leg. So just something to consider. This is really the only thing that is a hard and fast rule for me personally as a teacher. And like I said, I will only give feedback to people who are in training. So if I go to a class and somebody does this, I'm going to look out for my body, but I'm not going to necessarily go up to the teacher and tell her that she shouldn't be doing that unless she asks me, why did you transition the way you did? Why didn't you go from, you know, half moon to standing splits like I cued? And then I would tell her, but she would have to ask me, right? I'm not going to just give unsolicited advice on just, you know, just because. So I don't think anybody has any questions about that. Does anybody have questions about this?
Yes, I've got one.
Yes.
Like literally a few days ago, I did transition, which was similar to what you just described. However, the teacher who was cueing did it like a little bit differently. So he was first in half moon, then he kind of went through like balancing aeroplane and then revolved it. So you kind of have this transition in between, and then he was going from one leg to another, and I tried it. It is hard. It's doable, but that's obviously wrong, right? Because it's like you described.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's doable once, it's doable twice, it may even be doable 20 times, but it's going to cause wear and tear on the hip socket over time.
Okay, I will not follow that sequence again. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Any other questions about this? All right. Does anybody do this in their practice and really like it and feel like it feels good? Because that happens. Sometimes people do like this, and sometimes people do think it feels good. I'm just curious.
I actually love it, but okay. And I didn't know that's just kind of the school where I was trained. I won't do it when I teach anymore. But I mean, I'm kind of hearing it like, because I've been doing it for like 10 years, and it just feels good to my body. It's kind of like sunburns. You know, you do 10 years of the damage comes later. So, yeah, I won't sequence it anymore because I really hear what you're saying.
Sure, sure. Some people, it does feel good in their bodies. How many people have done this and it doesn't feel good in their bodies? Oh, over here, Shiva says me. So yeah, you know, I mean, like, I'll leave it up to your interpretation, but it's really it's the only thing that I recommend not doing. And we have somebody with their hand up. Would you like to speak?
I have a question. Again, like what should we say to people who might be a little bit like me, Peter, and sort of maybe brought up in like competitive environment where they think like no pain, no gain? Because sometimes people come with the background of like sports in a like different environment, maybe competing, maybe like you know, hard work and so on, or CrossFit and so on. So it might be quite different. And the mentality might be like, oh, I really need to feel like I'm pushing myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that what we would say is, we would say, you know, there's no pain, no gain refers to muscle soreness, right? So, right. So you go in and you lift a lot of weight, and like you get a little sore, and people are like, no pain, no gain, right? It doesn't apply to injury. Like, right? No athlete is going out saying, I need to injure myself so I can get stronger, right? They're saying, I need to create micro tears in my muscles so they get bigger, right? And so we need to remind people, no pain, no gain means that I am developing strength, you know. But when we have pain that's associated with degrading or degenerating the tissue in the body, that's dangerous, because those tissues won't grow back. And in fact, if we get a labral tear and then, you know, the bone starts rubbing on the bone, that's when we get bone spurs, because it sends a signal to your nervous system to make more bone. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts, feelings on this particular thing? Okay, cool. All righty, moving right along. So transitions. Cues. Let's talk about cues, guys. Avoid polarizing cues or incorporating your opinion into cues. And we talked about this. Saying things like, chair pose, everybody's favorite pose, is not necessary. You know, we're polarizing a pose if we do that, right? Some people love chair pose. Some people don't like chair pose, but let's make it as neutral as possible. You know, saying things like, you know, like making a pose good or making a pose bad. I think it's something that we need to avoid. Also, giving people shout outs. Giving people shout outs in class. So who has been in a class where the teacher was like, great job, Michelle. That's exactly right, Shiva. Right? Who's been in that class? I'm sure some of us have been in that class. And sometimes it makes the students feel singled out. And sometimes it makes the student feel like really proud of themselves. But it's not only about the student you're singling out, right? Let's say you guys are all in my class, and I've got, you know, 130 of you guys in the class, and I look at Amy, and Amy's doing something really great. I'm like, that's a great job, Amy. How many of you guys feel like chopped liver because I've given Amy a shout out and I haven't given you a shout out, right? You know, it's playing favorites with your students is not what we're doing here, right? Remember, yoga is a spiritual journey inward, and it's solitary. It's not about the other person. It's not about other people. So we want every student to feel seen and heard and connected to without alienating or isolating them. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
As a group of women in the restroom over 50, we used to joke that we're the invisible ones. We didn't care. We found it amusing, but it's certainly a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. And I'm sorry that you felt that way. And that's what we're trying to avoid a little bit of.
Yep, I'm sorry. I was trying to hit the mute button. Oh yeah. I saw a meme the other day that talked about how people expect most small businesses, Black-owned businesses, to operate at the same level as Amazon, knowing that the businesses don't have the capacity, labor, tax breaks, all the things that make Amazon what it is. And so, you know, people were just chiming in that this is your opportunity to, you want to stand up for these businesses, right? It's like shop Black, you know, buy Black, do all these things Black, but then you're the first one to condemn them.
Okay, I think so. Thank you, guys. Sorry, I thought we were in a comment. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So does anybody else have any comments or feedback on giving students shout outs or cues that might be activating? Or, you know, I don't like to use the word triggering, guys, because triggering is triggering. That word is triggering for some people, especially if they have had trauma around guns. So activating, I like better. Does anybody have any other thoughts or feelings about that?
Yeah, I had a comment. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
You know, it's not just, you know, singling people out for praises, which, yeah, then if you're not one of them, it's like, what the heck? But it's also.
Oh, sorry, darling. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
There's times that, you know, there's, especially when I take new classes for the first time, I expect that I'll be doing things incorrectly, and I appreciate corrections. And there's corrections that are given to the entire class. And then I was in one class where I could, for the first time, and I could tell the teacher was giving all her directions directly at me from the front of the room, which gave me no time to respond. And if it was something that I had a restriction on and was doing a modification or alternative, you know, other than yelling my personal business across the room and disrupting the class, I had no way to communicate that. And it was kind of a mortifying, you know, entire class. So I would also be mindful to say, you know, I mean, it's great when teachers have time at the beginning so you can talk to them and let them know if you have any limits, and request adaptations, which don't really have an option to do online. But then it's also nice then if you have, you know, if you are seeing someone repeatedly doing something wrong, to walk over. It may be poor body awareness, but it may be something else too.
Sure. I think that's a really great, great thing to bring up, is that, you know, it's not only saying great job, you know, Amy, or great job, Shiva. It's also, you know, when you are not picking on, because that's never our intention, right? Our intention isn't to pick on a student, but let's say you've got a student, it's their first time in class, you know, maybe give them one correction, one, you know, even if there's like 100 corrections you could be giving, you know, giving too many corrections can make a student feel singled out, or, you know, like it can be mortifying. Yeah. All right, I've got Cassidy up next.
Yeah, I was wondering maybe what the difference is between a shout out and like corrective feedback, essentially.
Yeah, so I think like a shout out would be like if you were in my class, Cassidy, and I'm like, yes, Cassidy, that's it, right? And then otherwise, like corrective feedback, I would like be like, well, with corrective feedback, I oftentimes, well, I won't say your name, right? So that's one thing. I'm not going to say, hey, Cassidy, make sure you wrap your shoulder onto your back body, right? Or something like that. I would just cue that. I would cue that. And if the person I'm trying to cue isn't picking up on it the first time I say it, then I'm going to go where I'm in their line of sight and I'm going to demo it. And if they still don't get it, I'm done. Like if it was a class where I was putting my hands on people and giving adjustments or assists, then I might, you know, ask them if I can adjust them. But again, I'm always going to ask each time, even if I've asked at the beginning, I'm going to ask again, right? I think it's, you know, with those adjustments or corrections, it's important not to be nitpicky about it. Again, we know what has the propensity to injure people, right? So what is that? It's hyperextension of the shoulders, hyperextension of the knee, right? Those are two things that can injure people. We've got this, you know, moving from external to neutral on a weight-bearing leg, that can injure people. We've got, you know, I don't know, there might be a couple other things, you know, like the way people get into headstand, for example. We know no kicking, running, or jumping into headstand. If you can't float into headstand, you have no business being in headstand, right? So I've had classes where we're in a wide-angled forward fold, and I'll say, okay, if you have headstand in your practice, go ahead and, you know, take headstand. And inevitably, there is one person in the room that decides they want to start to try to kick up in the middle of the room into headstand. And so I gently say, no kicking, running, or jumping into headstand. And if they still do it, you know what? I don't know what to do at this point. You know, we're not 2-year-olds. I can't go over and admonish somebody for doing something with their body. You know what I'm saying? So I think we do the best we can. Did that help, Cassidy?
Yes, I would just say, you know, I told you before that I have a Bikram background and I used to get called out a lot in class. But for me, I really loved it and it was really helpful because I don't come from a really active background. And so I didn't know a lot of ways to put my body and how it should feel or the sensations. And so for me, the corrective action, especially hands-on, was really helpful because I didn't know better. And that's the biggest way that I grew in my own practice, was having that type of feedback.
Yeah, and I think correcting a student is perfectly fine. I just don't like to use their name and I don't like to call them out. And I'll do the verbal cue and then I'll demo it. And then if I need to put my hands on them, I'll ask them, do you mind if I give you an adjustment? And then after, I always ask them, how does that feel? Because they might be like, this feels horrible, lady, and okay, you know what I mean? Like, I want to give people the right of first refusal, right? So yeah. Alrighty, so next up, we've got Yana.
Hi, thanks. Going back to the issue of polarizing poses and whatnot. So I asked that in the chat as well. I've heard a few instructors, for example, will be taking tree pose and then they would say, this is actually one of my favorite poses. I mean, I know this is, you know, again, projection free. They're probably bringing in their own materials, but would that be considered a faux pas or a no-no?
I mean, I don't like doing it because, so my teacher used to say, her favorite pose was revolve triangle. So Pavrita Trikonasana, revolve triangle. And she used to say, I can't even believe I'm gonna say this to you guys, but this is what she used to say. She used to say, Mama's favorite pose. And every time she said it, it just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Like, what is happening right now? You know, Mama's favorite pose. I used to laugh about it in class. You know, it's sort of endearing. It was part of her personality. But I wouldn't do that in a class. There's no way. Because again, you know, then it gives the impression, guys, that it's about the teacher. So who was Shanti teaching for in that class? Was it for us or for her? I mean, I can answer that for you, but I won't, you know, I mean, like, and again, why was I going to the class? Was I going for me or for her? I was going for her. You see what I'm saying? Like, this whole experience I've had around my experience with her as my first teacher was extremely enlightening. And like I said, I love her dearly, but where I was when I was in that place as her student is a totally different place than I'm in right now. When I was practicing under Shanti, my whole practice was about Shanti. When she and I stopped having a relationship, my whole practice became a practice of self-realization. And that's yoga. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
Okay, who's next? Yua?
Actually, what you said was super interesting about like going to the class for yourself, not for the teacher. And I really like that idea. So I wanted to find out, what do you think about introducing Mysore style? And I think I could be able to do it where I am. I've got like a small group of students. Maybe it might be a little bit bigger at some point. And what's happening, I've got 4 people who are like totally new to yoga. There's just no one teaching around here, and one person who's been doing yoga for 2 years all the time, Ashtanga. And every time I try to like, it's kind of hard because the guy is really like, he knows it and he wants to do Ashtanga all the time as well. But the other people, I feel like they need actually like, to distress, open up, and just learn from the beginning, not to jump to you know, full primary series. And I just had this idea recently to maybe try to develop their own sequences and try to do Mysore style, so they can also do it when I'm not around, because probably I will start traveling and I won't be able to do the classes all the time here, and I want them to get better. So is that something what would be like really empowering for the students? I know it's not like a part of Western culture, and I was going to studios in London most of my life, and all the classes were led. Like wherever I went, there was no Mysore style. But I studied in Mysore actually, and my teachers were like very open to that. I understand different cultures, but I don't know if I should be introducing that in Italy, in that sort of, you know, different levels between people. What's your opinion?
I think that's fine. I mean, I actually like the Mysore style, and I think it would be really neat if people could come into a Vinyasa Mysore setting where they're creating sequences, you know, and they're doing it on their own time and they're practicing in community. But it really, then it really does become about the practitioner, and it's really not about the teacher at all. The teacher's just holding the space there. So, you know, I think that that's an interesting, it's an interesting thought. I like it, Ua. I think that's fine.
I think I give it a go and see what will happen, because they really need different things. Like I can tell their bodies are so different, and someone had even like hip operation. So one leg is higher than the other. He has like special shoes, but he doesn't wear those shoes on the mat, so he needs block on one side, not on the other. So I thought maybe I can create like very specific things. I would chat to them and see what they say. Yeah, I think you encouraged me. Thank you for that.
Well, and let us know how it goes. I'm interested.
I will let you know. I will ask them and try to do some sequences. Obviously, they will be keen, but yeah, let's see. I'll ask. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Beautiful. All right. So next we have, I'm not going to say your name right. Is it Marisa? Marisa?
Yes, Marisa.
There we go.
Thank you for. I'm wondering here, and like if we have a crow pose, and instead of say it's good or bad, I don't know if you can you say like this is a challenge pose because you're gonna have to build some strain on your arms, some core muscles, and also it's a balance pose. So it's a challenge pose for this. You have to build before you get to the full pose. Is that something you can say?
Yeah, I think that's not that's not polarizing. Polarizing is good, bad. Saying something's challenging isn't good or bad. It's just challenging, right? I mean, I think that what I'm trying to get you guys to see is like, I don't know how many of you guys know what beast pose is, but it's a pose in the States where they like get on your hands and knees, or some people call it bear, where you're on like a tabletop and you lift your knees and it's like, and you hold it. Like it's a transverse abdominal like workout basically. And you hold it. And, you know, I've heard teachers say, I know, nobody likes this pose. Well, why? You're already in it. You're already frustrated. Like, why go there, right? Just, you know, just say, all right, guys, breathe through it. I know this is challenging. Breathe through it. Use your breath to calm your nervous system, right? It's another good opportunity to teach using the breath to regulate the nervous system. All right, any other questions? All righty, so we're gonna go back in here. Cues, so like I said, to avoid polarizing cues, you know, maybe avoid shout outs or avoid calling students out. Remember that story I told yesterday with my friend, and you know, that teacher was saying that everything we did was wrong. It's sort of funny because we're both yoga teachers and we're here and everything we're doing is wrong, which obviously I didn't believe, but it really affected my friend because of the state of mind she was in that day, right? We don't know what our students are walking in with. What we think is very benign can be actually very activating for students, right? Just remembering Okay, themes. Now we talked about this earlier. We did talk about this, and I've got this beautiful little picture of like the Grim Reaper over here. And, you know, so when we are theming, avoid sharing personal experiences when you theme. Use caution with theming around current events or political movements. Now this is a big deal, and I'm going to go back and forth between like sharing my opinion on this and then opening it up for some discussion. Because I've seen some memes out there in the interwebs that say things like, if your yoga is not political, you're not doing yoga. Well, that's just not true. That's a perception of somebody's reality, but it's not a universal. In fact, many of us have talked about how yoga is our quiet time. It's our time to come inward, and that, you know, mixing politics and yoga, or mixing, you know, like popular culture in yoga, or mixing even, you know, like different movements in yoga can be very activating for people. So we just need to be aware that, you know, yoga's maybe not the venue to start a political uprising. Yoga is maybe not the venue to theme around, you know, serious social divides. And I do want to talk about this because there is so much going on right now around civil rights and around, you know, inclusion and accessibility. So we can theme around inclusion and accessibility. Those are undercurrents of the civil rights movement. Do you see what I'm saying? That's an undercurrent, and that's appropriate. But if I theme a whole class, like an entire class around, you know, well, and I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to give you an exception to the rule, okay? If I theme an entire class around the Me Too movement, okay? So we all remember Me Too, right? If I theme an entire class around that, chances are some people will receive it well, and some people will be extremely activated and traumatized by it because of their trauma. Does that make sense? Yes? Can we see this from this perspective? And so it's not that we can't speak to the movement. Like, we can speak to the movement. That's totally fine. But we cannot, or maybe we can, but perhaps we should think about it. If we theme around the movement, then we are running the risk of isolating people and reactivating trauma. And what we don't want to do is reactivate people's trauma, okay? So let me just give you an example. If I was to theme around Me Too, and I had a person in my class that had been sexually assaulted, I could inadvertently bring that up. Yes? Yes? And that person might inadvertently feel that trauma in their body again. Yes? Yes. Okay. So that's what I would say we want to avoid. Can we theme around human rights? Yeah, we can theme around, you know, everybody deserves to be seen, heard, and connected to. Everybody deserves the right to have personal space and privacy. Do you see how those are undercurrents of the Me Too movement? Like, and I can use those undercurrents to theme without being offensive or potentially re-traumatizing somebody. But as soon as I get real specific and I get really on like my agenda of what I want to communicate to the masses, then that's when it can turn into something that I don't want it to turn into. Okay, so I want to talk about that because I have seen a lot of stuff on social media about, well, if you're not doing this, then you're not really supporting the movement. And so there are ways that you can support, you know, the anti-racism movement, the Me Too movement. There are ways that you can support the LGBTQ movement without saying specific things that bring up these traumas in people's bodies. You know, I mean, like, for those of you who are on the call, the women of color, the men of color on this call right now, you have experienced trauma around racism and segregation, correct? Many of you have, yes? And so if I shout my perspective of, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, first of all, I'm not Black. So I don't know how I can go in and hold that space if I'm projecting my opinion, about what I think about it. A better and more inclusive way to do this is to talk about, everybody deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to be connected to. Everyone deserves to be, to feel safe. This is a safe space for everyone. You can say, I understand, I have empathy for those of you who are suffering. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a healthy way to show inclusion and support in your classes. But if you go in and you say, all these people over here are, doing X, Y, and Z, and that's why we're in this place, and blah, 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 blah. And I don't have any of these thoughts because these aren't my thoughts, but I'm thinking about times where I've been in classes with teachers and they have been projecting and it has been political, and they've read from a book, or they've said, all, Southern white men are white supremacists. Well, that's not true, and who knows who's in the room and what they're feeling, and so we don't know, I have this, it's an old story of mine, but when I was growing up, my family was very religious, and I didn't understand what adoption was. And we lived in Georgia, in Marietta, Georgia. And the woman that went to our church had adopted these 3 beautiful Black babies, and the family was white, right? And so they were really raising their children, and they loved their children. And I remember asking my mom why the children didn't look like the parents, because I was like 7. I didn't understand what adoption was. My parents hadn't talked to me about adoption yet, right? And it was an excellent opportunity for me to be raised and educated as a 7-year-old that, people can adopt, and it doesn't have to, like, children don't have to look like their parents, and, it's all about love. And I learned about agape through that conversation with my mom as a small child. Well, imagine if that mother is in, a yoga class, and I'm projecting that all Southern Baptists are, racist. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not even an accurate thing. That's my material if that's what I'm projecting out there. So we do a lot better with the service aspect and element of teaching yoga when we are able to say, what are the universal themes? Well, the universal themes are, what I hear people saying and what I hear coming up for a lot of individuals, both around the civil rights movement that we're seeing right now and around the Me Too movement. I'm trying to use them both so I don't polarize us again today, because that's not the intention. We're not trying to polarize this conversation. But, the idea is that, people in these experiences have had some universal experiences where they haven't been seen, they haven't been heard, they haven't been represented, right? Where they need representation, they need to feel connected, they need to feel part of the group, and they don't want to just somebody to say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. They want real action. So those are the types of things I can talk about if I'm theming that are sort of projection free. Thoughts and feelings. What do you guys think? So
I'd like to share on that. I'd like to say something. I've been around for a lot of years in 12-step programs, and we have a term called anonymity. And anonymity is about being equal. And we go into meetings and we only say our first name because we don't want to know the other person's last name. We don't want to know what they do for a living, how much money they make, because it makes us all even. And when we go in there and we share these personal things, it's much easier to feel safe. So it's the same kind of concept and equality that we all have, no matter what we look like, where we're from, how much money we make. And I think that's very important for many people. Most people, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm reading some of the comments, and I think that it's, I think, some of the things that we want to highlight is, the way we hold space in a yoga room is not necessarily the same way we hold space when we're listening to our brothers and sisters in the community, right? So like when I'm listening to my brothers and sisters in the community that are going through some of these hardships, that are experiencing some of this, you know, some of this racism or, you know, gender inequality, I want to listen to them and I want to hear them and I want to support them in whatever way, shape I can. And one of the things that has been brought to my attention and that I'm really learning is part of the reason that, you know, Black Lives Matter is such an important movement is because for so many decades, we have marginalized and not been able to really be with the type of racism that is in America. Okay. And so now it is time for us to take a stand against this. And it is time for us to allow our beautiful Black brothers and sisters to stand up and be showcased and to feel seen and heard and connected to in an equal and representative way, right? That helps them to truly speak their culture. And so that's a conversation that I would have with you guys as human beings, you know, that's why this is so important. When I'm in a yoga studio and I'm teaching yoga, my tone is a little bit different. I'm holding space in a different way, depending on who I'm teaching. And if I'm teaching a class of predominantly Black men and women, I'm going to teach that class a lot differently than if I'm teaching a class that is predominantly white, because I'm really trying to hold space for all of it. Does that make sense? As a yoga teacher, that's part of my job, you know? Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
So I'm in a lot of yoga groups online, and one of the things that I have noticed is I'm in a lot of different groups online. First off, I'm in a million different political debate groups and stuff. I'm probably way too active, but the groups with the most drama tend to be the yoga groups, and it's because of things like politics. And I'm wondering if there's some sort of, like, if someone tells you not to think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of a pink elephant. A lot of the rules of these groups are like, leave your politics at the door. This is not the space for that. But they somehow find their way in. So I'm wondering if there's a way to, like, I don't want to like completely avoid, I don't want to make it a topic or a theme, but I don't want to like pretend like nothing's happening. Is there like some sort of balance so where we can kind of say, we're not going to do this and we end up doing it, versus that's not happening at all. It's just this room. Like, what's in between?
So I love that. And Fia asked me how I would teach differently. So I want to speak to both of those things. So first, Adriana, the first thing that I want to say is thank you for your comment. It's a spiritual bypass when we say those things are happening out here, but I'm going to put my blinders on and focus in here. That's what we call spiritual bypass. I'm not doing the work then. I'm not looking at the work, right? And one of the things that came up for me, you know, before we started the scholarship is, you know, I was dealing with a lot of my own feelings around what was happening and all the things. And everything we're talking about came up for me. Every single thing. I was angry. I was angry about, you know, my ancestral involvement or lack of involvement. I was angry about, you know, like the political response in some states. I was angry about lots of things. There was a lot of anger, right? That was my initial reaction was anger. And then it moved to, well, I can't be angry about this forever. I've got to do something about it. You know, if we don't do something about it, nothing ever changes. So then it was like, what is going to be supportive and actually get stuff done? When we sit on our soapbox and we project our BS, yeah, we feel better initially, but it doesn't do a lot of anything, right? So I was really trying to look for things that we could do as a community to change those things. And I think that saying that we don't talk about politics in yoga is not accurate, because politics is karma, right? And politics is our material, right? And so that material, what I'd rather people say is, you know, ask yourself why you think the things that you think. on all sides of the stick, right? Ask yourself why you think that, why are you married to your belief system? You know, can you be with the idea, even the idea that other people might have a different belief system? And so those are the ways that I work with it, right? Because a lot of times, you know, and I live in the South. I mean, Texas is still considered the South, right? And Austin is extremely liberal, but it's still, you know, like, my grandparents grew up or lived in Austin, and they were, I mean, I never put up with their crap. I never listened to what they said. And I told them that where they could put their opinion on more than one occasions. But I've seen a lot of that stuff in these communities, in these Southern communities. And I lived most of my life in the South, you know, in Georgia and Florida, Texas and stuff. So I think that in these communities, in our community for My Vinyasa Practice, I'm not scared of politics. I want you guys to feel free to talk about what you need to talk about and to work through what material you need to work through. The only thing that I'm asking for us to do as a community of yogis is to be honest with ourselves. To be honest with ourselves that every single person that walks the face of this planet has inadvertently marginalized another group of people at some point in their life. And we just have to freaking own it, right? We just have to be okay with, we're in a divine being, in a human experience, and we're trying to learn, we're trying to uplift, we're trying to continue to evolve and involve, right? So I disagree with those communities that, you know, say it doesn't belong here. It does belong here. Does it belong in the practice? Yeah, maybe not. You know, maybe not. It's like we were talking about earlier. Can you have a practice that's anger management practice? Sure, you can. If everybody's on the same page, feel free, you know, but in a general public class, I have mixed feelings about bringing politics into an actual practice. But when we're talking as a community of yogis, we need to be able to talk about these things. We need to be able to see each other with respect, you know, and I understand that there are some people that still are not comfortable saying that they've marginalized another group of people, that there are still people who are not comfortable with admitting that they've done things wrong. And that's okay, because they're where they're at in their process. And I can say, I love you, I see you, I hear you, I connect to you, but this is my experience. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? How does that feel? Does it feel okay for you? Does it feel like I'm seeing and hearing you and meeting you where you're at when I'm talking like this? And I'm asking because I'm really trying to up-level my ability to hold space in this way.
Yeah, no, it feels genuine. Thank you for answering the question.
Good. Yeah, it's really hard, guys. One of my best, well, she's not, I won't say she's my best friend. She's a friend of mine, and she, I'll go ahead and tell you the studio. So it was Black Swan here in Austin. So if there are any Austinites in here, you're going to hear a little bit of the local yoga scene stuff. But basically, they're a franchise. And so they all started in Austin. All the teachers, all the managers started in Austin, and the managers started buying up studios all over the country. And so one of the managers was a wonderful girl, and she opened the San Antonio branch of Black Swan. Well, about a year ago, a picture surfaced of her and her husband in the UK. And if we have any people in the UK on, I'd love to hear your comments on this. And they were at a Halloween party, and they were in an inappropriate outfit. And I'm not going to say what they were dressed as, but it was extremely racist. Okay, I will say that. It was racist. And the picture was taken about 10 years ago, and somehow it got onto Yelp, okay? And the way the company handled it is they threw this girl under the bus, and they said, we don't tolerate racism. We don't do this. We don't do that. And I sat back and I looked at them and I was like, you guys, I worked with you for 4.5 years, and I heard you guys make sexist remarks, make racist remarks. I saw you touch people inappropriately. I saw you do a host of things, you know, inappropriately. And rather than taking action for yourselves, you threw somebody else under the bus because it was easier than admitting that you had marginalized groups of people. Does that make sense? And that enraged me. I was furious about it because I felt like it was another example of us trying to, you know, like throw a blanket over, you know, our actions as in society, when that's not what this movement is about. The movement is not about pointing fingers. It's about recognizing where we have fallen short. It's about recognizing how we can grow and better support our brothers and sisters. It's about seeing people and meeting them where they're at, seeing ourselves and meeting ourselves where we're at. Right? And that's how I'm interpreting this movement, is that it's my turn, it's my chance as a human to grow and to learn how to better serve all populations, all different swaths and walks of life, so that I can better show up for my community. When we just brush it under the rug and we act like it doesn't, you know, matter, then that is just further perpetuating the systemic issues that we're dealing with. Thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, Michelle, actually, I was just going to mention that I think there's quite a difference between, you know, playing into someone's drama versus supporting a cause. Yeah. You know, when you see an actual injustice, you do need to stand up. Just going back for a moment to those the online yoga groups that are sometimes incredibly negative, and I've seen that myself recently. It's really disappointing. But most of the time, I feel like you can just brush it off because it's somebody else's drama and they're not actually putting anybody down, or they're not marginalizing a group or anything like that. It's just noise in that case. And so I feel like in that case, you want to just bring it back to the path you want to follow, bring it back to the positive, bring it back, take it out of the gutter. I'm a downhill mountain biker as well. And one of the rules in mountain biking is don't look at the rock. You want to avoid the rock. Go around the rock, look at where you want to go, and you'll follow that path naturally. So yeah, the rock is just noise. Ignore it. Go around it, go by it. Don't play into that drama. Yeah. As long as nobody's being hurt, of course, and you're not, then you need to stand up.
That's a really good point, Jennifer. And we talked about this on office hours the other day, is, you know, when do you stand up and take a stand? When you see people being hurt. You know, somebody doesn't agree with you, it's just noise. People are getting hurt. Yeah, that's when you have to. If it's outside of your values and you don't, then that's another form of marginalization, right? So we have to recognize that sometimes silence can be, you know, can be part of the problem. And then sometimes, you know, it depends on what's going on. But I love these types of conversations. I'm coming at it from the point, and we're about to talk about LGBTQ. My daughter's trans. And before I had a trans child, I'm 99% sure that I in some way marginalized the LGBTQ community. I am sure in some way I was not as supportive as I could have been, or I wasn't as open to understanding. But the day my daughter came to me and said, "Mommy, all I want to be when I grow up as a girl," was the day that I said, "You can be whatever you want to be, and I'm going to love you no matter what." And it took that experience for me to then, and honestly, I have to credit Alexis, like she's probably the reason why I can be in this enlightened state of being, because every single person I look at is a divine embodiment of God, because she made me look at it that way. God doesn't make mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't look at my daughter and say, "Oh, you're a mistake." No, she's perfect exactly the way she is. She's dealing with her karma beautifully, actually. And so, you know, I can apply that. I'm not Black. I don't know what it's like to be a Black woman or a Black man in this country, but I know what it's like to be the mother of a trans daughter. And, you know, and I worry about her life. And I've talked to some of my Black friends that worry about their children's lives. That's a real thing, guys. You know, I mean, it literally brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, because, you know, we can easily like put on our blinders, and it doesn't have to be just these very, very politically charged things that we're talking about. It really can be as benign as, you know, somebody bullying somebody at school. That's not benign, but, you know, imagine how that feels for that person, and how many teens have we lost, you know, in the last several years to, you know, cyberbullying. they kill themselves because they feel like they don't, you know, matter. They're not seen, they're not heard, they're not connected to. It's heartbreaking to me, you know? So it gave me a fresh perspective in having a child that didn't fit into a box and having to realize that, oh my God, you know, this is what other people of other cultures, of other, you know, colors, of other nationalities must feel like when they feel like they don't fit in and they feel other. I was having a conversation with one of our scholarship people in training, and I was like, I don't know how you have felt marginalized or how you have felt like other, but I too have felt marginalized, and I have too felt like other. And until we all feel like we are one, we have work to do.
Yeah, Michelle, I actually can also speak to that. My oldest daughter is gay, and her partner is trans male, so transitioning from female to male, and did not have a good time at home. I actually took that teenager in, and I'm gonna cry, oh boy. After a few years of this confused child that they didn't figure it out yet, but eventually did figure it out, and by about 19 decided to take testosterone therapy and begin transitioning. I can't even begin to tell you, after about 6 months, I went into their room and said, I just have to say, the difference in this person I am looking at today is so much more calm, so much more settled, so much, just that living your truth is what it comes down to in my mind. And when I think of both Black communities, Indigenous, trans, whatever, what have you, that isn't accepted as quote unquote normal in our society, they can't live their truth. They're always, it's like they're being judged and they have to hide things. And when you see someone actually, you watch them begin to live their truth and become who they really are and accepted for who they really are, it is the most, besides watching childbirth, it's the most magical thing I've ever seen. Ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Because liberation, Patanjali says it, and I'm going to take it right back to the sutras, guys. Liberation can happen in this lifetime. Suffering is optional, pain is inevitable. We don't have to suffer. We can come together. We can be in a healing relationship with fellow humans. And that all it takes is some acceptance, and you know, sometimes we just need to, you know, be quiet and listen. So any other comments, questions, thoughts? Yes, Iwa.
It's very interesting, like the concept is amazing. Like the only thing which kind of came to my mind is like, we are so blessed that we can express in that sort of way and talk about it openly. In some countries like Eastern Bloc, it's very dangerous. Like I've been to Russia, to many places, and you have to, if you want to survive, like you in certain places, and even in Poland, like you can't do it. Like they will beat you up. So, you know, we've got this power to actually express ourselves, and I lived in UK and it's so much easier. But if you move to Eastern Bloc and post-communistic countries, like in some places, even if you want to, like, maybe, you know, like it's nice to talk about it, but in some places you can't be open because that might be life-threatening, and just crossed my mind, so I thought I'd share.
Well, and I think that's a good point. We do, you know, it's so funny. On the 4th of July, everybody was like, freedom doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. It means you get to do the right thing, right? And we take it for granted so many times. We're like, I'm free, I can have my gun, and I can have my beer, and I can have all these things. And I'm like, dude, that's not the point. Like, the point is that we have the freedom to do what is best for the greatest collective consciousness. Paul, you're up, my friend.
All right, thank you. I wanted to say I appreciate the position that you were taking in terms of let's look at the underlying thing instead of you know, calling one side or the other, or pointing fingers or what have you. Now again, I guess a finger will have to be pointed, but having the underlying thing. So, and what kind of has grabbed me about the position that the yoga community that I have seen as an outsider, I guess, is that it's more about conviction in terms of saying, hey, if part of what you're going to do, that you're going through in yoga is trying to be the best person that you can be, then, you know, look around you and look at how your fellow brethren and sister are living. And if you are being the best person that you can be, then is it imperative upon you to say, do something in some shape, form, or fashion if, you know, if you notice that. So that's the feeling I have gotten from the yoga community as a whole. I guess, you know, in different areas there may be different things or whatever, but that's how I feel as though. So the things that I started to learn more about yoga, that's how I felt convicted to say, you know what, you know, there are times that I have to say something and do that. And this is for everyone, not just me and my community, my group. I can look at myself and my opinions when I say things like you guys, and not even realizing that how I'm marginalizing other folks. And it's just like, what are you guys talking about? You know, so it's a learning process all the way around. And I appreciate the overall message that I hear from the yoga community. So, you know, I just want to say that.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. There's two things I want to say that came up for me around that. Is the first thing is the yoga community is not perfect, guys. And yoga, we talk about it in multiple different scriptures. So the scriptures we look at are the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and it talks about the risk of egoism. When we get so in our head and we think we are a God, not one of the embodiments of God, that's when we get into our little space of like high horse and all the things, right? And I do see that in the yoga community. And so we just have to be really careful about that. And I'm with you, Paul. I'm still working on that. Even though I have a trans daughter, you know, she gets really ticked off with me if I say, hey, buddy, what's going on? And I'm not meaning to do anything, right? Like I'm still working. I'm still learning, right? And this is a part of my process. And my husband hates it when I call him babe. I think I said this yesterday. Like it infuriates him. He won't even like look at me because he thinks it's a microaggression. So it's all this opportunity for us to learn and to grow as a community. And sometimes, like that's why I said inadvertently marginalizing. We don't have to intend to do something, and sometimes it happens anyway. And that's when it's important to take the responsibility for it. So yeah, I thank you guys for all of your honesty and your respectful conversations and, you know, about this. We do need to talk about these things. We can't ignore them. That's not what yoga tells us to do. It doesn't tell us to ignore these things. And I'm going to bring up Gandhi. I brought up Gandhi yesterday. Gandhi like went on a starvation, like hunger strike to save the Indian culture, you know? And I mean, like he fought with peaceful protest and he was like righteously angry about what was happening in India, the colonization of India. And we have to understand that, you know, Gandhi didn't lay back and be quiet. You know what I'm saying? He saw the injustices, he saw what was going on, and he did something about it. We can't just sit back and hide behind, you know, our own symbol and be like, oh, I'm all peaceful, la, 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 la. That's, you know, that's one aspect of our experience, but it's certainly not the whole. Any other thoughts, feelings?
Can I just share one thing or two things actually?
Really?
So one regarding, I swim in a few pools that are not, I guess you wouldn't consider Black things like gardening, running, yoga, cheerleading, like all of these spaces I've been in and been pretty much the only person of color. And a lot of those communities are not speaking at all. And if they do say anything, then they say something to the effect of, we stand with you. Is that you, the white supremacists, you, the Black people, like what is you? So it's like real evasive about how they choose to support, and understandably so, it's a business and whatever. So I do want to say thank you for actually addressing it and like creating a space so that way we can communicate openly and share ideas about how we can better support each other. And then also that it is okay to acknowledge that, you know, A, we're not all perfect, but B, that we all can acknowledge that we're not perfect and figure out a way like, how can I better support whatever our community is. But I do find that not saying anything is painful. because I am in those groups, and I do hear the, can we not bring this up here, or can we not make it political? In the back of my mind, I always think, I cannot take off my skin color when I go some places. Like, I'm in the grocery store, so can we not be Black today? Or I'm going to a cheer competition, can I not be Black? That's not my option to not talk about it or not address it. So why is it your option to be able to swim in this pool and not acknowledge somebody else's difference? So that's why it's painful when people just say, like, disregard it. Like, can we not talk about this here? If I had the ability to take off my skin, then maybe, but I can't. And vice versa. Like, I'm a mother of 17-year-old twin daughters. The same with them. When they go in their respective places, they can't take off their skin, so it must be acknowledged. And then more so for my 24-year-old son, who's like high in academia, blah, 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 but people don't see him as that when the police pull him over or when he is conducting business. They see his skin color first. So no, we don't have the option to take off our skin color and not address it in any pool that we're in. So again, I just want to say thank you for creating this space to acknowledge that something needs to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, like, it literally brings tears to my eyes that is something that you think about, because nobody should have to think about, you know, taking off their skin. Nobody should have to think about changing their personality to fit into a certain group. Nobody should have to think about, I mean, Jesus, it's like, thank you so much for sharing, Nicole, because these are the conversations that are so important for us to have. I mean, to be honest with you, in the last couple of months, I've wanted to take off my skin and be something else too, to be honest. Like, I don't agree with a lot of the, like, white, projection that's out there, right? And that white projection comes from my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and I heard it, and I didn't put up with it when they were alive, and now I'm like, well, crap, I'm still having to deal with this BS, you know? And it's like, that's, I think, one of the things that for me as a white woman was so infuriating is that this shit is still happening. Like, can we not wake up and start to have real conversations about this, where we can see other people's perceptions and other people's hurt and their pain? And I know we're talking about sequencing, but can you guys see how it's important to talk about these things in order to have, like, inclusive classes? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I wanted to say that I truly think it is a matter of awareness. Like, I've run across people that are not of color that don't realize, like, the extent that I have to alter what I say, or is it going to come across aggressive, or, for example, one of my daughters is a competitive cheerleader when we travel everywhere. So I have to research the cities that we've gone to see, like, how racist is it? And so when we go to these places, the other white families are like, let's go here, let's go there, let's eat this, let's eat that. Well, we can't do that because that is in, like, a KKK cell. I can't just willy-nilly travel around the city, which turns into me and my family eating at a hotel room because I'm afraid for our safety.
Yeah.
So
And
the awareness is, like, people need to be aware that there are issues and you just can't go and flow how it used to be, or how it, it should be.
how it should be. Freedom for everyone, not freedom for a select group of people. I mean, come on. And thank you for bringing that up. And I'm really glad that we are recording this, because hopefully, hopefully it will activate some people to think, because I have never once in my entire life thought about researching racism in a particular city. That's my privilege. You see what I'm saying? And now I know, but I have, on the contrary, I have thought my daughter can't go to A&M because it's too dangerous for LGBTQ. There's no way I'd send her to Texas A&M. Do you know that, like, recently they killed a gay guy and strung him up, and I mean, it was, like, horrible. It was very graphic. I won't go into it, but that's happened in the last 5 years. So, I mean, I'm with you, Nicole. These are really important conversations, and thank you so much for sharing and, for educating.
Like, now you can also see that once you've had that experience, you're sharing with all 142 of us. So now we are aware of, how we treat the lesbian, gay community, and then vice versa. I'm sharing my story, and so everybody else. So hoping that will create awareness as it continues to go on, and not only with ourselves, but then as you start to see it, then speak to it as well and acknowledge it, and that way that's creating some type of change. So
absolutely. So this uplifting collective consciousness, this is what we're talking about. The more we have these conversations, the more we uplift the collective consciousness, the more we all start to think about things a little bit differently. And I'm with you, we need to have these conversations. And here's what I think, and now I'm getting a little bit into my personality, but I think part of the problem is when you share and when I share, then people who haven't thought about that get defensive. And instead of saying, oh my God, thank you so much for sharing, they're like, well, I would never have thought that. No, this is not a time for you to tell me what you think. This is a time for you to say, okay, I get it. That's enlightening. Thank you for sharing. Now I have a different perspective. You know what I'm saying? And yeah.
I totally agree. I've run across people that have said, they are of the non-marginalized group saying there is no oppression. And I have to change their perspective. Like, you wouldn't feel the oppression if you were not on the other side, and so then it's like, oh, the light bulb goes on. You're not feeling it because you are of the privileged group. Now let's be empathetic and see how you can share or grow or, change the dynamic so it isn't that. That's what this perspective change is about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I often think, so when I grew up, we were really poor and we were always like on the verge of being evicted. So and my parents told me things they should never have told like a 6-7-year-old either, so there was a lot of like enmeshment in there. And I often think, God, how blessed I was that I didn't grow up thinking that it was all one way, because my grandparents were really wealthy and my parents had no money. Like, there were times where we didn't have money for food. And so had I just grown up in one perspective, it would have been really hard for me to have seen other people's sides. But because I grew up in like this very mixed sort of reality, I was able to say, oh, wait a second, this isn't the way it is for everybody. And it made me automatically a little bit more open. Again, it all goes back to our perception of reality, and our story around reality is not universally true. And if we understand that, then we see everything as an opportunity for uplifting collective consciousness and for growing as an individual, right? Because there's no way I can ever see all the perspectives. So you guys have to tell us, we have to tell each other, we have to share our perspectives in a way that's non-judgmental, that's in loving kindness, so that we can uplift collective consciousness. Thank you, Nicole. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to say anything? I know this is a lot. Went in a direction.
My husband and I were in South Korea for a while. He was in the Navy, and we adopted a little girl there. And we had to think about where we could be stationed with a Korean child.
Yeah.
We seriously thought, okay, East Coast, West Coast, probably not Northeast, things like that. That we had actually grown up in the Northeast, and we knew there were so few Oriental people in that area that it would be a problem because people fear what they don't know. And we had to think about things like that. And today, she has to think about where she is going, because so many people look at Orientals and say they're Chinese, and the Chinese started this COVID, and she goes into stores and people make comments. So it's the same type of stuff with her, is that, and she says, I don't know if I would ever have the strength to look at him and say, I'm not Chinese.
Oh,
you know?
It's, it's a real hard time to be human right now, guys, but it's people like you and situations like this where we can talk about it and we can grow and we can learn that is going to really change.
I would like to share an exercise we did here with a group of other yogis. We live in Dubai, and the group is like people from everywhere and very different backgrounds. And the exercise we had to do one of the days, because we get together and do yoga and meditate and stuff like that, is like just look at each other in the eye and say, I belong to you. And then after this, it's just you make the commitment, because nobody will be there to check on you doing it or not doing it, but you make the commitment of getting out of your comfort zone and just choosing a random stranger or any random person that's not like your friend or your family or wherever you're comfortable, and doing an act of kindness. You don't want anything in reward, just doing it because you understand this person is God, and God lives in everywhere and in everyone. And it's such a powerful, like humbling and powerful exercise to do, really. And it really helps to create this awareness that I think is what we all need. Maybe not so much a lot of the people in this group, but the society in general, because there is a lot of separation and not so much awareness of the unity.
Yes.
And it's a very beautiful exercise. So many times when I hear people making comments or being a bit funny and I feel uncomfortable, I share this with them, and I love to see the reactions because they're like, why would you do that? You know, and they're like, because what I do, the stone I throw in the ocean, it affects everybody. You know, like you cannot deny that. You just cannot deny that. And then I think it really, people, they start thinking, you know, even if they will never do it, at least it puts the seed in their mind. And then, I don't know, it's just an exercise, but it was a very, very humbling experience in a way that the problem is real, the issue is real, and it's like one very positive way of addressing it. Because before, I don't know, I felt very threatened by certain groups of people. So I chose always these groups of people, and I was very nervous, like my legs would shake, my heart would shake, everything. I was like, you know, and I just go in there and say like, okay, doing my act of kindness, and then just like running away, you know, because like you don't know the reaction. Some people look at you like, why are you doing this? Like, you weirdo, you know, like, who are you? But in the end they get it, and they're like, oh, thank you, you know, like, yeah, it's very powerful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that.
I wanted to share something too.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who has shared your stories and your family stories. And thank you so much to you for teaching us, for allowing us to have this space. I also wanted to like mention that I appreciated when you said that politics is our personal stuff or our personal material that we need to work through, because it's, you know, my reasoning to be part of this community has been social justice, right? That is one of my pillars. And I might not be preaching in my classes, but it is where I stand, right? So I appreciated a lot how you connect the work we need to do on the ego, right? The personal, the individual, but also how as we grow individually and learn with humility to say, I don't know, and therefore see that through understanding other people's experiences, we're also growing in this collective consciousness. And I wanted to add, because I'm not from the US, I mean, I live here, but I'm not a US citizen, and something also that I wanted to bring up, and not to take away from the conversation about the Black Lives Matter movement and also racism, structural and systemic and interpersonal, all the type of racism that the Black community here in the US has experienced, and also, you know, in Latin America and in different parts of the world. But I want to add to this consciousness, right, that is a global consciousness. As we, as societies, as individuals, start having these very deep conversations about the history of various type of oppression and that have created trauma, and understand how we can meet each other where we are at, it's so important to also kind of like, you know, challenge this idea of borders, right? This and mentally, not just like, you know, the geographic borders, but the fact that borders have been created with colonization, and therefore there is also this sense of ethnocentrism within the US. And I'm from Latin America, I'm from El Salvador, and so it's really understanding how countries also, and specifically certain politicians, make policies that affect other communities, right, outside the so-called geographic borders. So like, and in that, recognizing that there is so much spiritual power for us as yogis, as yoga practitioners to kind of connect the self with the collective, with the global. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Erica. And you're absolutely right. I mean, right now, what we're dealing with in America is really our, forgive me for cursing, but it's really our shit, right? America has some stuff around this, and we have not been honest with ourselves as a country, right? And then the politicians we currently have in place right now are not really helping us to move forward. In fact, they're sort of stagnating our growth. So we've got some challenges, but you're right, there's a global issue. This is like systematic of like the human race, and we've got some work to do, you know, as an entire world, you know, as an entire world, we have some work to do. I'm gonna move on to Tanya.
I'm so, thank you. I'm so appreciating this afternoon session and just the candor and the honesty that everyone's bringing. And I loved the comment that I think the woman said she was in Dubai, that she made about using the collective of her yoga community to reinforce the notion and the truth that I belong to you. And this session is essentially that. But I guess my question is, because yoga classes are kind of a limited time frame, and people are coming in and we're going through a collective experience, but there is not this. What we're doing now is not being brought into the yoga classroom or the yoga studio. And just looking at America, and I know that there's different dynamics globally. I've lived in Europe, I've lived in Africa. Americans are very segregated. We live in very segregated communities, and I'm here in New York, literally adjacent to the city. And you know, I mean, the only diversity that you have is within the cities, but the towns and villages are like 90% homogenous in terms of race, in terms of class. So it's really in your place of employment or in the school. If, you know, in some schools, not even schools tend to be segregated because they're based on where you live. But in your place of employment, in a yoga studio, where you actually have an opportunity for a kind of cross-cultural sharing and a sharing of perspectives. So I guess my question is, how do we actually foster that? Because I think it's one thing to encourage kind of introspection around our own stuff, but I think it's quite another thing to say, you know, the class today is, we're talking about inclusion, and I want you to look at the person on the mat next to you and say, I belong to you, or, you know, let's have a collective intention around inclusion. Have you done any of that? And that's my first part of the question. And the second part is, when I was living in Senegal, we had a small yoga community. We developed a lot of kind of intimacy and trust between those of us who were practicing together. And our yoga teacher started incorporating a lot of partner work, which I also thought was really helpful in terms of, and I know that can be triggering depending on what people come with, whether or not they want to be touched. But I just wanted to hear your perspective, Michelle, on kind of thinking outside the box for ways, what we're doing now and discussions we're having now, and hearts opening that we're seeing now, how that can be brought in. And I go back to actually one of your lectures a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about someone has an offensive hate speech tattoo. How do you deal with that? Or if someone comes in with, you know, a logo or something that can be triggering, how do you deal with that? So I think it's all kind of coming back together. It's a kind of a full circle moment, but I just kind of wanted your take on how we can bring more of this in ways that impact.
Well, I think that the first conversation starts with teachers. And so we're a community of teachers. You guys are in training, and the way I view training is the moment that you sign up for training, you're a teacher. Okay, so I don't do this whole like, oh, they're students until they graduate and they have experience. No, the moment you sign up for training, you are a teacher. So now we are talking in a community of teachers about how we need to address these things. And, you know, somebody said in the comments, you know, but I don't really like talking to people at the yoga studio. That is common. Most people want to come in, they want to hit down dog, do their practice and leave. And they don't really want to have that, you know, a conversation, because that's their only place that they can come to like not have a conversation, right? But then there are tons of us that want the conversation. So here's what I think that we need to do. And let's try it with my studio. I'm happy to be a guinea pig. Let's do it. You know, we can have these 5 classes a day, and then once a week, maybe I need to offer, you know, like a round table where people come, they come together and we can talk about it. The only rules are you have to be respectful and I'm the moderator, right? And so if we get somebody in there that can moderate these conversations, but allow for the conversations and allow for the, that's where the growth happens, right? But if we're so scared we don't want to touch them, well, that's not going to help us. We're not going to grow, you know? So I'm proposing, you know, we're making a lot of changes, guys. And some of you guys have heard one of our initiatives with the scholarship program is to start the MVP diversity chapters. Have you guys heard about this? We're rolling them out in October. So basically what they are is I'm going to reach out to you guys as we get closer, and I'm going to say I need to have a representative in every state, in every major city. So Texas, I need a representative in Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. I need a representative in New York and all the major states. I need one in Florida and all the major cities. I need, you know, we need a representative. We're going to go in and train you and teach you how to go in and push into yoga studios to try to get these conversations to happen. And in agreeing to be the sort of chapter representative, you're agreeing to do one community event a quarter, and we will pay for it, right? So we're going to give everybody like a budget, $500 a quarter. You guys go out, you create these events. We're going to tell you how to do it. We're going to tell you how to talk to the studio owners. We're going to tell you how to talk to the people. And, you know, this is one of the ways we're doing it, right? Another way that we're doing it is we're working with the scholarship people. We have a group of about 9 people that are in the scholarship program that are going to help us to diversify like social media and Instagram. I refuse to put stock photos of people on my Instagram to make us look like we're inclusive. So we have to work with the community, and not just the scholarship community, but the whole community, to have a more diversified look and feel in our internet presence. That's another part of this equation. So there's multiple different ways that we can do it. But I say, let's start a monthly like social justice meeting where people get to come together and talk about it and be seen and heard and connected to and educate one another in a respectful and loving way. And I think that that's what these are the steps. These are the anti-racism steps that need to happen. You know, and I'm always open for ideas. Those of you guys who've been around for a while know I am literally, I will take your idea, I'll chew on it, I'll figure out how to make it part of the program. So, you know, come to me with ideas. Let me know how we can better be of service. You know, this idea of I belong to you, you know what that means? It's Ishvara Pranadama. I am devoted to God and you are an embodiment of God. So I belong to you. I surrender to you. I am of service to you. You know, I mean, it literally almost brings tears to my eyes because that is the yoga. There is no separation. When we buy into the idea that there's separation, we are further perpetuating this suffering. It's a global suffering, and we have got to stop it, you know? So these are the ways that I think that we can stop it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you for sharing.
Michelle, I'd like to say something based off of what you were just confirming about yoga and coming back to I belong to you and being in our humanity of being like God, being in our consciousness. I think it's important as teachers to remember that we're teaching people to come back to their bodies and to come back to that center place. And in my experience as a Black woman, I was always polarized for being tall. And at 6'2" as a woman, people want me to be a runway model, or, you know, play all the sports outside of my own specific sport. I like to joke and respond to people and tell them that I was a gymnast sometimes, but that reflected in a lot of my energy being called outside of my body. And when I found yoga, it reminded me to be strong inside of my body. And that's what sports was to me. That's what being tall helped me find, right? That if I play sports and I'm active and I'm breathing and I'm sweating and I'm using my muscles, I'm inside of my body. But as soon as I left that space, I was leaving my body because everybody else was I was in reaction to the world around me. And so finding yoga was finding that strength to center back within my body. And I feel so grateful to be a part of this program and have this community and conversation to be able to teach that to other people, to other athletes, to other Black women, to other tall people, to other people with hip pains and emotional activation that's waiting to be had. And all of that is because I chose to bring my own energy back into my body, to bring my focus back into my body, to bring my awareness back into my body, and negate my urge and want and will to make it about anything outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm just super grateful. And I just wanted to add that the feeling of being in this group is so confirming and beautiful, and it feels like love. And I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Well, we are grateful for you. I mean, every single one of you we're grateful for. And, you know, just the opportunity to hear everyone and connect to everyone in this way. I mean, so this is a really good time for me to say, this is sort of what sequencing is, right? It's not about the teacher. It's not about how fancy it can be. It's not about how tricky it can be. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's about the community. It's about like meeting the community where they're at. Yeah, I've got a few other hands raised. I want to make sure we get to everybody. Christy.
Hi, thanks. So yeah, I've listened to this discussion with a lot of interest. But I kind of feel like, you know, when we're talking about this among the yoga community, it's kind of preaching to the choir, right? And we come to this with a certain set of values, typically. That and for my own personal growth, I'm trying to have compassion for everyone, right? I find it very difficult to have compassion for some people who have very different values than I have. That's number one, and I'm struggling with how to deal with that. Number two, how do you talk to people who have very different values, who, you know, to make an impact? I mean, a real impact, we've got to convert people, right? To a certain way of thinking, this collective consciousness. And how do you get through to people? I mean, you know, when somebody says, there's no such thing as systemic racism. I mean, what do you say? Yes, there is. You know, I mean, I would like to know, I would like to learn some skills, number one, to cope with it in my own heart and mind, and secondly, to talk to people in a way that will be persuasive and not confrontational.
Sure. So here's what I do, and I found this extremely effective, okay, extremely effective. I take them right back to the Yoga Sutras and I say, oh, well, that's your perspective. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you know what the Yoga Sutras say? There are 5 types of mental fluctuations. Here we go, guys. There's truth, perception, verbalization, memory, and sleep. And your perception is that there isn't a systemic problem with racism, but that's just your perception. Can you see that perhaps someone else might have a different perception? And if we can get them to see just that, even if they don't agree with me, if I can just get them to see that, the seed has been planted. Does that make sense? And you know, the truth lands and it takes root. And all it takes is for you to get somebody to see that their perception is not universal truth. And then there's hope. There's hope for it. So that's what I say. I mean, I'm very fortunate. You know, I don't have any family. And so I don't have to deal with this, you know, like and because I don't have any family and it's awkward. I mean, you guys are more my family right now, to be honest with you, than, you know, anybody else, because, you know, if I'm out in the real world, like out in the actual world, and people say, oh, what are you guys doing for summer? And I'm like, oh, we're just hanging out. And they're like, oh, you're not going to see the grandparents? I'm like, we don't have grandparents. And then the conversation stops and I don't have a lot of conversations after that. But so when I look to you guys, this is like more of like my family. And you're right, we're all on a very similar page. We might not be on the same page, but we're on a similar page, right? So it's not as challenging as dealing with the uncle that, you know, is a member of the KKK, or the aunt that, you know, tells her children not to swim in a pool with people that are of different ethnicities. That stuff still happens. It still happens. People need to recognize that it happens, you know? But I always, regardless of who I'm talking to, even if I was talking to Trump, if I was talking to our president, I'd say the same thing. That's your perspective. You know, can you acknowledge that everybody's perception is not, or perspective is not going to be in alignment with yours? And I'm pretty sure he'd tell me no, that he's right. And I'd be like, okay, there's literally nothing I can do. If somebody is so married to their dogma that they will not recognize that other people have another perception, that's, I mean, honestly, there's nothing I can do about that. We talked about this actually in yoga of psychology. And I was really careful not to say, here's what I said, and I'll try to be as transparent as possible. When we have somebody who is so married to their perception of reality that they do not believe that there is another perception, it doesn't mean that they're mentally ill, but it borderlines on a quality of mental illness that we call delusional. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that they're mentally ill, but I'm saying if you can't see that somebody else, that another human can have an experience that is not the same as yours, if you are so married to the idea that you're the only person who can experience things and that this perception is completely 100% true, then, you know, like we said in Psychology of Yoga, to be delusional, you have to tick multiple boxes. It's not just one box. But this is one of the boxes you have to tick. Does that make sense? So at some point, I throw my hands up and I say, I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm not here to help you to find, you know, like that open mind. Like I can't change somebody who's that dogmatic, but I can recognize it. I can recognize it as their material and I don't have to internalize it or attach to it. The more people that start to come into this fold of being able to be with people, being able to be with them regardless of their skin tone, their race, their ethnic background, their sexual preference, their gender identity, the more people that can start to be with things as they are, the more we are uplifting collective consciousness, even if those people, that there are people that aren't going to go our way, that's okay. It's okay. It's part of the process. Does that help at all? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing to that, Christy? you, one, have to make sure that the person is able to, you know, view another perspective, but then two, adults learn by modeling. So instead of going out there and saying all of these things like you should, demonstrate that with your own behavior, and those that want to receive your message will fall in line with you and continue on to do that as well. So lead with your own behavior and lead with your own words instead of saying, here's what you should think, because people aren't going to receive it as that. They're going to receive it as you telling them what to do and then not want to change their perspective. But if they see that what you're doing is working and it's right and it flows and it's in alignment, then they'll fall in line as well.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on that 1 second. And we do have several people in queue, so I'm going to try to get to everybody, but we are getting close to the end of today's session, and I do want to just hit on a few other topics. So first of all, with what Nicole's saying is modeling in everything you do. Model. Be the change you want to see in the world. And if they don't want to follow you, you can still hold space for them. If my grandmother was alive today, I'd hold space for her, even though she wouldn't acknowledge, you know, what I'm doing or you know, what my values are. I'd still love her. I still hold space for her. It doesn't mean I have to follow her, right? I can stand in my authenticity. I can be in my truth, and I can be with, you know, the community in the way that I feel like is most beneficial. So that's what I would say to that as well. I agree with you that part of this mature spiritual journey that we're on is being able to hold space for all people, even if they don't agree with us, only to the extent that it doesn't cause more suffering. So if it starts to affect other humans in our class, if it starts to create suffering within us, Ayurveda says that all disease comes from the mind. Don't put yourself in a situation, I don't really care who it is, where you are having so much suffering and dis-ease because they will not see your perspective, that it puts your body in a state of compromise, right? Know when to hold them and know when to walk away. Yep. I'm going to move on. Heidi, you have your hand up?
Yes, turn my video on. I'm not sure. My video is not on. Is my video on? No, it's not on. Well, I'll just go ahead and start. I wanted to share an experience. I've been practicing yoga and until about 2.
Oh, Heidi, you're muted, honey. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Okay. Did you hear what I was starting to say or no?
No, you can start from the beginning. Sorry.
Okay. So I wanted to say that I've been practicing yoga for 11 years, and it's been almost exclusively in a gym context. So it's just been like whoever happened to be teaching at a certain time, that's the class that I went to. And up until about 2 years ago, every single one of my teachers has been white. And 2 years ago, just by chance, I walked into a certain class at a time that I liked. And the teacher was an African-American woman about my age. And I wanted to share some things and also ask kind of the people on the call and you how we can acknowledge cultural to make a class inviting. So I'm going to share it from the opposite perspective, which is that I walked in and she was very loud. She was like a very strong woman. So to me, it was a little bit off-putting. I was used to the very calm, you know, and we're going to put our foot like this. And she's almost like a drill sergeant, right? So at first I was like, whoa, this is like, I don't like this. And then she played R&B, she played rap, and I was like, this isn't the flowery stuff I'm used to. And it was very off-putting to me. And I kind of sat with it and I was like, I really like the time of this class. And I would love to be able to come to this class, but this is really like bothering me. It's not my usual vibe that I'm going for. But I kept going to the class, and now it's my favorite class. I mean, she's like the most amazing, beautiful, loving teacher. But the other thing that I want to say is that that was the first time I also was in a class where there were a number of African-American people. And so getting back to what you were saying about, you know, marginalized people. I think I was marginalizing unconsciously and thinking, well, you know, maybe Black people just don't like yoga, because I wouldn't really see Black people in class. And so then I realized, well, maybe it was the way that yoga was being presented that wasn't reaching out to that community, but she was doing it in a way that they appreciated and it brought them in. So I just kind of wanted to open that up for your thoughts and also other participants in the class.
Yeah, so I think that you did the right thing. You kept going. And that's what I would say to anyone. It doesn't matter if it's the teacher isn't, you know, is loud, or their race or their music or whatever. If something bothers you guys, keep going. Don't avert from it. If you are annoyed by something, ask yourself why and keep, because that's your material, right? And I've been talking about this the last couple of weeks. If you are attracted to something or you are averted to something, that is karma, right? The things we don't care about, the things that we aren't like triggered by or activated by, either in a positive or a negative way, that's not necessarily our material. It's the stuff that makes us mad or the stuff that makes us feel real good. Those are the things we need to look at, right? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I keep doing this? So going and staying and being uncomfortable. And then over time, you're like, yeah, wait a second. No, I like this. No, she's really funny. No, this is great. Like, and your whole perception changed, correct?
Right, right.
That's perfect.
And now I'm even okay with the music now. It's like, okay, I mean, it's a different way to do it.
Exactly. And that's some of the work. And this is a beautiful example of doing the work to really sit with. And sometimes that work means I'm going to go to the class 16 times and then I'm going to end up saying it's just not for me. You know, I mean, like I could tell you a story on the other side of the fence. There's a teacher in Austin who's a man, and he is like very sought after. He's a very attractive young man. And he knows he's very attractive, and he can get real handsy with people, and he can be really like overly flirtatious, I guess you could say. And I went to his class once and I was like, well, this is not yoga. And then I went again and I was like, still not yoga. And then I went a third time and I'm like, all right, I know it's not yoga. I'm not coming back. Because I wasn't going to like go outside of my values. Like at some point I was like, all right, I got this, right? Like, but that's a different situation. I think in your situation, you did exactly the right thing and it worked out for you. So I want to acknowledge you for staying with it. Good job.
So as far as, would anybody have any advices of setting a context in a class of things that made you feel comfortable, made you feel included? Maybe it could be music, for example, like having more of a world playlist to kind of include different cultural backgrounds, or things that just stood out, people that are from minority communities in the group, things that stood out and made you feel like, oh, I feel like I belong here.
Yeah, anybody have any thoughts or feelings on this?
I want to.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. I just want to say, I will speak for the Black community about music for 1 second. And y'all jump in when I'm wrong. But as a people, music brings us together. We love music. Like, from, you know, Chuck Berry, for some of y'all who are really young, all the way to Chris Brown, you know, to Michael Jackson, to Prince, you know, girl, all, you know, Beyonce, you know, In Vogue, all the music, we love the music. And so for us, what I found is that we tend to like those kinds of classes. Heidi, what I find interesting is that my reaction probably would have been like yours, because I grew up in yoga that was very Eastern centric. So no music, silence, here comes my 3-year-old, all kinds of quiet, because I need quiet from this little, you know, being. I need quiet and that space. So it is one way that we kind of make that open and welcome. I think we talked about it earlier when you say to the class, you know, what would you like? Or maybe your description specifically says, this is going to be, because this is my plan. I want to do a 90s hip hop yoga class. That's not going to be for everybody. It's just not. But some people will come to that class and they'll feel welcome and will love it and it's going to be great. And then other people might come to my class that's about singing bowls and the young lady who talked about nature music. I love that. That's just, that's just me and calming and all, yogic in its nature. So I think that each class that you as the teacher present will be welcoming. But again, it always goes back to the personality. Some people want all the woo, 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 woo from their yoga teacher, and some people want meditation and levitation. So it's really going to be about seeking out the yogi that speaks to you. I've been doing yoga for 17 years. And I can say that I've left several yogis because they just didn't speak to me. Didn't know what they were talking about. They had all the asanas. They could say all the poses and everything was great. But in the end, it did not connect to my divine. I did not walk away going, ooh, I feel lifted. I walked away saying, ooh, I stretched. That goddess pose almost took me out. But I didn't feel the feeling that I wanted to feel. So I really think it's about you, the individual. And I will clap it up for you for staying, because that took a lot. So good for you. And that's what you keep doing. Be open. We all need to be open. Try other things. Look at other people's perspectives. It's not about you. It's about the collective us. So that's my speech for today. I'm going to just let that go, and namaste for everybody. Thank you.
Carla, thank you so much. Really beautiful. Is it Starlet? Is that it? Beautiful.
Starlet, like dinette, kitchenette, Bernadette. Starlet.
Teaching online, you better hook us up, because I know a lot of people want to come to that class. So
I will let you know. I will put it down in the group. I'll let folks know. I promise.
Please do. Yes, ma'am.
Could I speak to that? So, as I obviously am a woman of color, I'm coming at it from a different perspective though, because I guess I just want to warn people. Everyone is different. It's not about the teacher, but the teacher is going to have their influence and their style in the class. That's just inherent. Something that I've experienced in yoga is I've never been to a class with a person of color as a teacher ever. That at least that wasn't obvious. Maybe someone was white presenting, but something else. But a lot of people, they see me and they think that I like R&B. I'm gonna talk a certain way, I'm gonna do a certain thing. I just kind of want us to our Black culture is real, but we're not all the same. We're not all the same person. And I kind of grew up in a weird situation where, even though both my parents are Black, I look light skinned and have certain hair texture for whatever reason. I talk a certain way because my mother works on the phones, and so she grew up talking like that. And it's hello?
Yeah, we got you.
Oh, okay. Weird. I just got to pop up saying, oh, whatever. But anyways, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I guess I just want to caution people who might not be experienced with hanging out with other people of color, because we're still a minority, right? We're not everywhere, that we're not all the same.
Correct.
So
correct. Absolutely.
It's not like I dislike R&B or dislike rap or anything like that, but I'm probably going to have, I'm going to make a yoga music album, and it is not going to sound anything like what I listen to. It's going to sound very droney and probably more traditional. And I want, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel weird saying that, but.
No, that was it.
Don't feel weird saying that. Beautiful. And that's what these conversations are so important, because we're not all exactly alike, and all white people don't think one thing, and all Black people don't think another thing, and all Asian people don't think another thing. And I lived in the Middle East for a long time, and believe me, all Arabs don't think one thing. That was a mind-blowing. I was part of the congressional delegation team, so I'd sit out on the tarmac with these Arab men until 2, 3 in the morning, waiting for congressional people to come into Kuwait. And they talked to me about, did you know that a lot of Muslims believe, they actually have a very similar belief structure to Christians and to Jewish people. And I had assumed that it was all this one way, and it actually wasn't. So, again, it's all about educating and uplifting and recognizing that there are many different interpretations of all this stuff. So good on you. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Okay.
So Heidi, so I just wanted to tell Heidi, I'm very racially ambiguous, so a lot of people are not sure what box to put me in. I know for a lot of people of color, we don't like the boxes. Like we just like what we like, and if I happen to go to your class and I like it, I'll keep going. But when I go to class, I don't want you to feel like you're being any different to me than you are to maybe your typical white student, because people of color get pinpointed often. We get like a target and people feel like they have to behave a certain way. Yeah. I would just like to go to class and just have the teacher treat me like they do everybody else, and then decide whether or not that's where I want to be. So I don't want you to make a special R&B playlist. I don't want you to throw trap music, even though I will definitely dance in the back of the class.
Especially if that's not their truth, right? If
Just,
that's not your truth, don't make the hip hop trap class if you're not trying to twerk with it, because that's not gonna work for us. You're gonna look foolish. Yeah.
I just want to feel like I belong there and you don't see me differently.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Really nice, guys. So I want to just touch base. There's a few things I want to, we're going a few minutes over, and I'm sorry about that, but there's a few things I just want to touch base before we leave. So we've done an excellent job of covering themes, everyone, and talking about music and talking about, you know, how we interact with each other as a community, how to hold space in that way. So now we need to talk a little bit more about LGBTQ before I let you guys go. So, you know, the LGBTQ community shares a lot of the same sentiments that we've already been talking about. Pronouns are probably the biggest problem right now. People see somebody who presents as a female and they call them she. People see people who present as a male and they call them he. But you have to understand, it really doesn't matter what somebody's sex organs are or how they identify in terms of like their affinity towards male or female, but everybody has a right to their own personal identity. And I think that's really what the LGBTQ community, what this movement is about allowing people to have their own identity aside from their sex organs. So we have to understand that, you know, and I'm going to use some words that are very like textbook science. Vagina and penis does not make you a woman or a man. Okay, those are sex organs, and those organs are for reproduction, but they have nothing to do with identity. So when I was growing up, I didn't really believe that I was very girly, right? Who can fall into this with me? I didn't identify as like super girly, right? And other people liked bows and purses and all these things. Did that make me less of a woman? No, not at all, not at all. So, you know, it's one of these things where in order to be inclusive with the LGBT community, first thing we need to do is resist assuming. And this is now about everybody, right? It's just what Autumn and Adriana were talking about. Don't assume. Don't assume that people look a certain way, they like a certain music. Don't assume that people look like they're a girl, that they want to be called she. Don't assume that people look like a boy, that they want to be called he. You know, there are a lot of trans individuals that don't want any pronouns. You know, there are a lot of people that want to be they, them, you know, and that's it. They don't want that pigeonholing, right? You know, it's so interesting. My perspective as a mom of a trans individual is super, super interesting, because I'm constantly asking, Alexis is starting to become more attracted to different, you know, people. And, you know, I tell her, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like one day she came to me and she was like, in order for me to have a baby, am I going to have to marry a woman? And I looked at her and I was like, no, you can marry whoever you want. You can get a baby no matter what. You know, there are many ways to skin that fish. You know, I mean, like you don't need to have, you know, a partner that can carry a baby in their womb to be a parent, right? So there's a lot of sensitivity around this too. I recently, guys, Yoga Alliance is not always my favorite organization, and they recently did this LGBTQ continuing education. And one of the presenters, I'm not kidding you guys, one of the presenters said, you know, you need to offer modification for trans people because, you know, when they start taking estrogen, their hips get bigger. That is BS. I cannot tell you how much BS that is. Your hips are not going to change because you're on estrogen. Women's hips, they're actual biological women's hips, which we call biological genders, cisgender, okay? So if you are cisgender, I am a cisgender woman, right? Paul, are you a cisgender man? I'm gonna ask him, I'm not gonna assume, right? And Paul will tell me yes or no. If he's born a man, he's a cisgender man, okay? And he may still not even want to use he, him. You know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't have to. Paul doesn't have to. Paul's a human being. He can use whatever pronouns he wants. So, but taking estrogen will not change your bone structure. Just like taking testosterone will not change your bone structure. You know, women, cisgender women have a different pelvic bowl because we have a uterus, and the uterus sits inside the pelvic bowl. This is a male pelvis. This is a male pelvis. See how narrow it is? It has room for a bladder and a colon, and that's it. But a female pelvis is much more broad. That we actually have a bigger bowl, okay? And so because of that, our pelvis, our hips are shaped differently than men's are shaped. Men's hips are typically shaped in a triangle. Women's hips are typically shaped more like an oval, okay? So when I heard this come out of a Yoga Alliance continuing education, I nearly fell off the chair, and it actually enraged me because I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's just crazy talk. Like, let's not perpetuate the ignorance, okay? Like, we shouldn't say things if we don't know them, especially about the trans community, especially about, you know, the Black community, about, you know, these people who are feeling oppression right now. I don't need to run my mouth and think I know things and say things that I don't really know. Does that make sense? So when we're dealing with these groups, please, please, please err on the side of caution. If you want to run anything by me, my door is always open. I don't even care if it has to do with yoga or not. You can always email me and ask me my opinion and ask me, you know, if I have information on X, Y, and Z. And if I don't have it, I'll try to find it. If I can't find it, I'll tell you, I don't know. You know, I'm sorry, I don't know. But the hormonal treatments are not going to cause those types of changes to where somebody would have like bone structure changes. What the hormonal stuff will do, though, is it causes a change in your perception of the world, and it actually alters the pituitary gland. And so, you know, there's a lot of confusion for trans individuals that are in the transition process. It can be a little confusing while they're in transition, because until they go through an actual sexual reassignment surgery, their body is still producing on some level the natural hormones that are in their gonads. So I have gonads as women, so does a man. Mine are my ovaries, a man are his testicles. As long as they have them, as long as I have my ovaries, even if I'm taking suppression treatment, hormone suppression treatment, I still am going to be producing tiny amounts of estrogen. Just like a trans female, like my daughter is a trans female, her testicles are still producing a tiny amount of testosterone, and so there's a little confusion there. Give people the latitude. Give them the latitude to be who they are in that moment, and give them permission to change their mind. They don't have to always like a dress. They don't always have to like a pantsuit. Why do we need to put everybody in a box? It's unnecessary. So just remember, you're going to make mistakes. My whole point of talking about the LGBTQ community is to say, we will make mistakes, and it's okay. The point is that we learn from our mistakes, and don't assume that because somebody has breast that they're a female. Don't assume that because somebody doesn't have breast that they're a male. Like, you know, we live in a day and age where if somebody came into my studio, like let's say that, you know, any of you guys, let's say Cassidy came into my studio. Cassidy presents as a woman, you know, but I might say to Cassidy, hi, Cassidy, it's so nice to see you. What pronouns do you prefer? There's nothing wrong with that, right? We're all okay with that. Cassidy, would you be okay with me asking you that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And it would probably make Cassidy feel like that I was seeing her for who she was, not for some sex organ that's on her body. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely like, it's taking it that step further. It's that next step, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to do that with everybody. You have relationships with people in your life and they've already established and told you what pronouns they want to use, et cetera, et cetera. Go on that, keep going on that. But recognize that there could be a day where that person you've known for 20 years comes up to you and says, you know, I really prefer to use he now, or I really prefer to use they, and that's okay. You know, just give people the latitude to be in their authentic truth. Give people the latitude to be able to change. And this goes for, you know, what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. You know, people tattoo themselves with all sorts of crazy things, right? Just because somebody has a tattoo on their body that, you know, is political or racial or whatever, doesn't mean they haven't changed. Give them the latitude to change. And if they show you they haven't changed, well, okay, you know, that's fine. But if they show you they have, you've just added, you know, a whole new level of compassion that that person might not have received from somebody who just assumed that the way that they were presenting is the way that they are. Does that make sense? Are there any LGBTQ people on the call that want to speak to this? I want to really, I want to reserve this to just people who are in that community so that we can get some authentic feedback here because we don't have a lot of time. Anybody?
Let's see. I posted, this is Heather, I just posted in the chat that one thing that I've had people told me is that they would like us to ask what their pronoun is instead of what is your preferred pronoun. Because just like, you know, I wouldn't say, Michelle, what's your preferred pronoun? You'd be like, well, it's not preferred. I'm just, my pronoun is she, her. Like, what do you mean preferred? It just is. So
sure.
That's something that I had to rewire my brain about.
Sure. And I think that's a great point. I think that's absolutely a great point. You know, again, like, oh, this bothers Alexis all the time when people say that it's a choice to be trans. She's like, nobody understands it's not a choice, mommy. Nobody understands. And I sort of understand because I've seen her go through some of the things that she's go through. No child would want to take shots this long every 3 weeks, you know, or every 3 months rather, you know, to say that they're a girl. You know, it's not convenient. You know what I'm saying? When you see what some of these people go through, I actually unfriended a whole group of people because they had something on their Facebook page about what's her name? Jenner, not Kylie, but Kylie's, I guess, other mom, like what is her new name? I forget.
Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah. Somebody posted something about how dare she call herself a woman. She's never had a period, blah, 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 blah. I flipped my pancakes, guys. Like, you talk about my personality come out. I was just like, are you kidding me? This is the most offensive thing I've ever seen in my life. You know, can you imagine those poor girls going through their life as transgender women? How many of us women, let's just be honest, I'm sorry about the men that are on the call right now, Paul, but you know, how many of us women could not wait to have our period? Could not wait. It was a rite of passage. It was part of being a woman. And these poor girls will never have that. There is nothing I can do for Alexis to give her that experience. And for somebody to get over there and oh, I was enraged, to be honest with you. I flipped my pancakes. That's my favorite term, by the way. Isn't it nice? It's like very nice. Anyway, I guess my point is, guys, you know, all of this, we can't assume anything. you know? And it takes me back to, well, you know, what are we talking about? We're talking about sequencing. We're talking about sequencing and advanced sequencing. Advanced sequencing to me is not about fancy movements. It's about inclusivity. It's about safety. It's about giving people options, right? So I've showed you how to give people options with different advanced asanas, take them out of gravity, put them on their back, give them the space to play, right? But also don't assume, try not to assume that, you know, our students are a very particular way. And, you know, when we make mistakes, it's okay. We're all learning, right? So any other thoughts, feelings, comments, especially from the LGBTQ community or anybody who is close within that community as well?
Well, one more thing I would like to add is that I've just had so many people ask me about my daughter, like, oh, well, is she going to, you know, have surgery and, you know, and all this. And I'm like, it's none of your business, you know, like, I mean, really, like, you want to know about the genitals of my daughter? Like, that's like, she's a minor, and let's just start out there. Like, let's not talk about a minor's genitals, like back off. So I just don't understand why people need to know what people are doing. Like, if you say you're, you know, a woman, you're a woman, you know, if you're trans woman, like that's what you are. And I mean, unless you're planning on sleeping with the person, you know, like, it's really none of anyone's business. And I just really, I mean, sure, people get curious. I understand, we're humans, you know, we can't help being like, wow, I wonder. But, you know, I just ask that people try to really be polite and not, you know, like if they meet somebody or know somebody, not go out of their way to, like, no, or just don't ask those kind of private questions. It's really rude.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I often think, and I don't know, you can tell me, Heather, what you think, but I think if Alexis had been born 100 years from now and the same experience, like she's born in a body that she doesn't identify with, I think she would have been okay just not doing the you know, surgery, not doing any of that stuff, because she doesn't have dysmorphia. She doesn't have body dysmorphia, because we've been able to raise her with an acceptance and a love of her body. And I don't judge her, and she doesn't judge her body. She does say some really funny things about it, though. I mean, it's pretty cute to see how they are, you know, sort of like working with this internally, you know, to see. But do you find that as well, Heather, that your daughter, it's your daughter, correct?
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I think that's a misnomer that, especially in the, you know, psychological DSM manuals, that they think that if you're like trans or something, that you have this body dysmorphia and that you hate your body. And yeah, just like anybody, you know, there's lots of people who hate their body, and it doesn't matter what gender you are. And that it's not inherently true that if you're trans, you hate your body, or if you're a trans woman, you hate your penis. You know, some people are fine with it. Some people aren't. Some people want to, you know, get surgery. Some people don't. It's just as varied and different as, you know, any of us cis women who, you know, whether we love our boobs or don't love our boobs or butt or hips or whatever it is. Like, some people like them, some people don't. It's really just, you know, it depends on the person, you know. And I think being a teenager, there's often, like, you know, some body image things and stuff. But yeah, my daughter doesn't seem to have issues with her body in that way.
Cool.
But plenty of other things, but that's another topic.
Sure. And thanks for sharing. I know, you know, people ask me that all the time. Well, has she already had surgery? And I'm like, she's 12. What are you talking about? Like, it's just so mind blowing to me where people go with it. And I look at it like, oh, well, it's sort of like, it's different and it's not, you know, this is new. But at the same time, you know, I know a lot of trans adults that have spent their whole life, you know, in a place where they didn't feel comfortable to be themselves. And now it's their time to undo the doing, right? To undo all this, you know, shame and judgment that has been placed on themselves. And us asking questions about their body isn't helping things. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't need to know what your private parts look like to love you and support you. You know, I don't need to know that. So just, you know, remembering I don't think these are conversations we're going to be having as yoga teachers. Again, it's sort of like Christy said earlier, we're preaching to the choir with, you know, having these conversations with other yoga teachers, but to create an inclusive environment, you know, just be aware that these are some of the things that, you know, may or may not come up. That these are some of the things that, you know, your students may or may not ask about. And really, you know, again, just the less we can assume, the better. The less we can assume, the better. Alrighty, guys. Well, I am not going to keep you much longer. I'm sorry we ran over today, but I really appreciate each one of you. So just to close the loop today, we were talking about sequencing. We were talking about advanced sequencing and what that looks like. And we went through all of these different scenarios. We talked about, you know, the actual asana, how we group poses. We also talked about, you know, the way we cue things. For those of you who are watching this video, and on the replay especially, I get questions all the time about the cueing sheet that I have. It's actually in the manual in the sequencing section. So that video is very old that talks about the cueing. So you can find that cueing sheet in the manual in the sequencing section. And yeah, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know how we can support you through training. And I'm going to stick around for a little bit if anybody does have questions for me. But thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your light. I just really, I love and appreciate each one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Ua.
Michelle, I was looking at chair yoga and I love it. And I think I don't have a suitable chair to, you know, do all the videos. And I would love to do it. And I just have this, I live in really like old house and the chairs are either like weird shape or they look like they very like rustic. So I looked at your chair and it's nowhere like near like mine. And I wanted to buy one and I did research. And if I put like yoga chair, you know, like the prices are just crazy. And I found some similar chairs, but they differ, you know, in terms of the construction. And I was wondering if I can buy a chair which doesn't have a yoga label. And maybe send you an email with options and then you could tell me what chair would be best, because I don't know if it should have a bar somewhere in between or not and so on. So is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey,
Alrighty.
can I ask a question? Yeah. I haven't heard it brought up. That's not to say it hasn't been brought up. I haven't been in the training. I've been in for about a month, I think. The neurodivergent community being part of the conversation as well. The people with disability.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Just being part of the in that section, that they get a voice at the table too.
Sure, absolutely. So we talk about that in adaptive yoga. I talk a lot about like people often think adaptive yoga is for older people, but it's not just for older people. It's for people that are hearing impaired, visually impaired, cognitively impaired, you know,
Awesome.
paraplegic, quadriplegic, all the things. So we do try. Honestly, Amy, we need to do a better job in all the areas, you know, because still when people think yoga, when people think yoga, they think skinny white chick. And, you know, honestly, I was driving down the road the other day and I saw, can you believe it, a tequila board with a chick doing yoga. And I nearly drove off the side of the road. I was like, what is a chick doing yoga? Skinny white chick doing yoga have anything to do with tequila, you know, but apparently it did. And so those types of things I think are stereotypes that we need to work to change. So continue the conversation, keep bringing it up, look over my adaptive stuff. And if you want to add anything or if you want to have a conversation around it, shoot me a note and we can meet one-on-one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I was going to ask about the primary and secondary movements for getting into the asana, but I'd really rather ask you about the 5 steps that we have to use when we're working our material that you talk about in the manual. And I'm a bit confused about that. So do we use it every time we have like an emotion or an upset, or just like once a week, or what do you think?
So when I started writing this training, I did every day. I would sit down every single day and I would say, what's coming up for me? And some days there wasn't much there, right? And some days there was a lot there. And I just did it every day. And now I keep doing it. So something comes up, I let the emotion come up. Like we were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. I was enraged and angry, and I let myself be angry. My husband kept saying, stop talking so loud, I can hear you. And here I was like talking really loud. I was so upset about it, but I let it happen. I let myself get upset about it. And then I said, okay, what's my material here? Oh, I've judged this and this and this and this and this and this. I forgive myself for buying into the idea that it's this way. I forgive myself for buying into the ideas of blah, 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 blah. And I did all that work. And I still have work to do
like,
because it will.
Is it okay to is it okay to use it as if it's material coming up about someone else? I can't remember. So like you can forgive somebody else for their action, or does that make sense?
Yes. In fact, I won't tell you who I did this for, but there was somebody who did something really, really, really bad about a year and a half ago, and it was very. It was a very, very high profile case, and I had to work a lot of material to find compassion for this person, and I did, but it took a lot of work. Yes, I believe that you can.
Keep practicing it then.
Practicing it, yes.
Michelle, quick question, and I didn't want to stop you earlier. I was clear on Brahmana, Langana, but I wasn't clear on Samana.
Samana,
yeah.
yes.
I just completely missed in your explanation what that was at all. Like I have Brahmana is expansion, Langana is subduing. And
then Samana is balance.
Balance. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yes.
So my purpose of doing this training, it's really to support the Latinx community, and something that happened a lot is that a lot of people, prefer speak Spanish only, or they only speak Spanish, either within the U.S. or outside. And so I'm wondering if I could do some in a way my practicum in Spanish, so I can get kind of start getting into, because it's a lot of work to really be into doing things in English and then trying to do it in Spanish. So and we can maybe talk later on one-on-one about how that could look like. But I'm just like I want to start there, and I wanted to ask you directly.
Yes, you can do your practicum in your native language, and hopefully we'll get to the point where we can start hiring people to teach in their native language. That's a goal of mine, is to have classes in other languages. Nobody's doing that right now, so
that would be awesome.
Yeah. So it's definitely on the radar.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys. Well, feel free to hop off if you're ready to go. I'm going to stick around for a couple more minutes. But I appreciate you guys. I love seeing you. I love seeing all your beautiful faces. Thanks for being here.
Michelle, I had a question regarding the, I don't remember how you worded it, but like the diversity cells or groups in each region or whatever. Did you say you would be sending out an email, or how is that going to be?
Yes. So I have a diversity chair who's putting together the, basically the training. So there's two parts of it. We have to train you guys to go and approach studios and to do events. And what does that look like, right? And then we have to train you, and then we have to give you materials to use. Does that make sense? So like Nicole, if you were going to be one of our chapter chairs, right? Then you would get training first and how to do it. And then we would give you the materials and like sample emails and, you know, like stuff like that, like sample even like icebreakers and things to talk about in these. And all of this is coming from the people who are in, like really it's coming from a lot of the people who are in scholarship right now or the mentors that are mentoring scholarship.
Yeah.
And so basically, once we do that, then we set you guys off. The goal is to have you guys launch October 1st. They know that they're supposed to bring this training back to me by like the end of August so that I can work with them to package it in a way where you guys basically get everything that you need.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to get involved with that. I'm an emotional intelligence consultant, so that's kind of what I do. So I totally would love to help.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Yes, Cassidy.
What are the qualifications to be on the diversity team?
Whatever. There's no qualifications. Are you human? That's all I ask. Yeah, we really, when it came to the diversity stuff about like diversifying Instagram, our website, all of these things, we really were looking for members of the Black community to help us with that because I don't have the answers for that. And I don't want to pretend that I know what I'm talking about either, you know, so we need to have a more collaborative approach. But when it comes to the diversity chapters or like the MVP diversity chapters I want to do, we're going to need people of all races, all different ethnicities. We're going to need people, because I mean, I think it falls on deaf ears if it's only one population. It's got to be a real cohesive mix, right?
I completely agree. A lot of the things that I'm coming up with, people won't hear it, like a racist won't listen to a Black person and suddenly change their mind. However, if there's somebody, you know, that looks like them, speaking in a different way or sharing a different perspective, they might be more apt to change their perspective versus, you know, why would I change for a Black person? That resistance would be there just based on skin color. So I agree.
I mean, it takes me back to the Yoga Sutras, like why the Yoga Sutras like won my heart, because all of this perception and all of this story just perpetuates this misperception of separation, you know, and that separation is what causes the suffering. And, you know, we're suffering unnecessarily, guys. You know, like we don't need to buy into this BS, right? We can, but some people are so married to it. Like I think about my father. My father's been gone for like almost 30 years. And no, not quite, I guess 25. My dad wouldn't have been able to see my perspective. He would not. He was entirely too closed-minded. He was entirely too stuck in his groove and his dogma. And I'm his own daughter. I can't imagine him accepting Alexis. I can't imagine him accepting what's happening in, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement or any of this. He would have just been completely blind to it. But if somebody like him got up and started talking to him, maybe he would have seen it, you know, but his daughter, it would have just been like a rebellion. It would have been activating for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's really hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
And the woman aspect too. So with like a male talking to a male versus male, female, and then that dynamic also comes into it also. So if you have a group of diverse people, male, female, people of color, non-people of color, then I see lots of changes being able to be made.
Trying to stay safe.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. Yes, ma'am, I see you. Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I'm from New Orleans with a side of Atlanta. I went to Dunwoody High School in the 90s. And My parents at the time were very strict Southern Baptists. So I remember being a 16-year-old hiding my yoga books, which were, true story, literally discovered and burned because yoga was a tool of Satan and I was not allowed to practice it. So having to grow up with that stigma, and also the stigma that yoga is for white people. And I'm not black, because my grandparents are from Panama and I'm into yoga and things like music with electric guitars. I grew up with the feeling that this wasn't for me, but I wanted it anyway. And because I'm stubborn and don't like being told what to do, I found ways to practice anyway. But seeing yogis that look like me, that resemble me, I'm 40 for one more month. And last Saturday with Venetia Weatherspoon was the first time in my life I had a yoga teacher who looked like me. And that was so touching and so powerful. And I just really wanted to say how much I appreciate you making this dream of mine that I really never thought I would attain. It's not chilling on a mountain with some monks like I planned, but COVID. And just for having this for us and making this available for us, please know how much I appreciate that and how much I thank you for that. And that's really it. I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, you are welcome. And you give us, once COVID's over, we'll get you on a mountain chilling with some monks. You just wait. But we will do plenty of retreats, and I have all of the monks available.
Now I got to come home to the States. I won't be able to see my country or my people this year. So I'm going to have to make it down to Austin to come in and say hi, y'all.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's great. We're really overjoyed with this opportunity. Everything that's happened. I mean, we always wanted to have this type of reach, but it just happened the way it did happen. And it was scary at first, like not knowing how it would be received, or if I was there was a point when I was talking about it and I was like, Chris, I must be out of my mind. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen with all of this, because I wasn't prepared. I'm not even going to pretend to tell you guys that I was prepared. I wasn't, but I just had faith that if we were coming at it from the right intention, that it would be received correctly, and that we would be able, that people would be able to see that as long as I maintain transparency, people would be able to see. And so that's what we've done. And, even to the point where, guys, we're almost, I think in the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to go into that 200-hour and there will be teachers of color in there on video. We've been spending the last 6 weeks creating something that is not just me. It was never supposed to be me. You guys know how this all happened, right? I wrote this for my teacher and it was supposed to be her, but, it didn't happen that way. And so now we've sort of gotten into this place where I'm like, oh, Venetia, Angela, Olivia, Antoinette, who can help me diversify this content so that it is more applicable to everyone? And because that's what we want. So I'm really grateful for you guys. I can't tell you enough. We certainly wouldn't be doing these things without you. So you are an integral part of this community. And in fact, I don't even like delineating between scholarship versus non-scholarship anymore, because I have so many people that are, Black people in our traditional track as well as in the scholarship. It goes both ways. So that's what I was actually telling them the other day when we started talking about meeting. We're meeting to look at our internet presence and to diversify our internet presence. And I was like, we've got to look at this in a different way. We've really got to change the way that we're looking at this so that it's not, so that it is authentic, so that it is resonating with everyone. And it's coming from the right place. So, yeah. I'm super excited about those diversity chapters though, because I really think that's what's going to make the difference. I think, you know, it's great to do this. It's great to teach. It's great to change the program so that it's more inclusive. It's fantastic to add more teachers to the, you know, to the video content. That's all good. But really, that's still only within our yoga bubble. Like, I can't wait to push out. And I think that my whole life has been leading me here. My first job ever, I was on the advertising team for McDonald's on the Eastern Seaboard. And I worked with a lot of Black owner operators. And I worked with a lot of people in like Baltimore and like Virginia Beach and stuff like that. Those were our places. Spent a lot of time at McDonald's University in Chicago learning how they worked. And, you know, one of the things that McDonald's does so well is it scales. And so when we started My Vinyasa Practice, that was the goal, is to make it scalable, so that it could get into every community, so that we could really change the world in a different way. It wasn't about Lululemon and like a yoga pose. It was about really practicing yoga off the mat in community as humanitarian intervention. And so that's what we're trying to do.
I was going to say real quick, I'm not in the States, but you know, when you start branching internationally with those diversity chambers, when you need a Madrid, Spain representative, holla.
Oh, I will. Oh, we're going to. I have no fear of international stuff. You know, that's another thing. Like, I'm so grateful I lived in Kuwait and Israel for 5 years, because it made me not afraid to go international. So yeah, you got it, girl. I will find you and give you a call. All right, guys. Well, I will let you guys go. It's been such a beautiful, beautiful day. Thank you so much for sharing and for all of your energy. And like I said, if you need anything along the way, let me know. I can't remember what next weekend's lectures are on, but I know that I'm out for a couple of weeks, I think. I'm pretty sure. And yeah, does anybody know? What are we doing next week? Yoga Nidra. Oh, well, never mind, guys. I'm teaching next week. Sorry about that. So Yoga Nidra is actually one of my favorite things to teach, and it's a really good one. So if you can make it next week, please do. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye, guys. Have a good one.